morning, everyone. This is Tony from Her Homestead Skills. I'm doing well. I hope that you all are as well. Been busy prepping some more. Today I decided to go out and do some more shopping for meat specifically. I had purchased a substantial amount of chicken, not huge, but a substantial amount the other day. And today I went out to get some pork, and I buy that from a different spot. I also picked up some more of the chicken carcasses so I could make another batch of chicken stock, and that is slowly dissipating. Mark is not having one every single morning, which is good, but he also does use that in cooking a fair bit. So I still will have to make chicken stock, but probably not as often now that the weather is hopefully turning. April's supposed to be nice. It's still very cold today. But apparently it's supposed to get much, much better within the next 2 days. So hopefully that's the case. So in the news, on the bright side, I've heard today that Russia and the Ukraine situation may be starting to resolve itself a little. We'll see what happens there. There's some. On another note, there has been another protest in Ottawa this weekend, and it was a follow-up, I suppose, to the truckers' convoy, but it was not mainly the truckers this time. It was mainly personal vehicles, and they did not stop. They didn't plant themselves there. They just circled the Parliament buildings, I guess, for hours on end. I understand that they were asked not to honk their horns, but they did anyway. But they left peaceably. But I suspect that this is not over, that especially now that the weather is improving, it will continue. I know that there are people who have not left. One fellow said he's been there for 59 days, I believe, is what he said, and the protests are still continuing. It's just that they are being a little more cautious now. And as a side note to that, one of our fairly prominent politicians, Mr. Randy Hillier, was charged with all kinds of counts. He was asked to turn himself in, and he did so yesterday to the Ottawa police. So we'll see what comes of that. Even should Russia back off and end this war completely, it's not going to change things in any hurry. I don't think that prices are going to go down in any hurry. It will take probably a good year to stabilize again, if it ever does. So I'm still continuing with my prepping, and I hope everyone else is as well. Okay, so the other day I went off to IKEA to purchase this 3-shelf unit, and it is a small one. The size is 36 length, 14 width, and 37 height. Now, I have purchased 2 of these in the past, and I used them inside a closet, and they are stackable. But I figured that this time around, I was going to buy one to use them for seedlings. And it's still too cold to put it outside for seedlings. But I have used the cardboard that it came in to create a top. Now, that's because I wanted to use all 3 tiers. And if I decide that I only need 2 tiers for my seedlings, I can pull this one up and get rid of the cardboard. And over that, and the reason I wanted the cardboard on top, I don't really need to put any weight on that. But what I did want was a way to hold this plastic in place so it didn't sag in the center. And I did go to Home Hardware and purchased 3 yards of plastic, and I guess it's really meant for tablecloths. They have it on a roll, 60 inches wide by 3 yards, and I was going to sew it, but I was able just to fold it over, and I still have access to it, and I can close it all up. And this should act as a mini greenhouse for my seedlings until they're ready to go in the garden. So I'm actually quite happy with the way this has turned out. Hopefully it works. And this whole setup, the plastic, the shelf unit, taxes, all of it cost me less than $70. Now I did used to have one of those large stands with the lights, like 3 tiers for lights and trays, and it held quite a few plants, and I gave that to my daughter when I sold my house. I think Mark bought me that years and years ago, and it was, I think he paid about $500 for that unit then, and I think it was close to $1,000 a few years back when I gave it to my daughter. So I just couldn't take it with me. So this works for me in the limited space I have, and hopefully it'll work just fine for the amount of plants that I have for my small garden. Okay, so I continue to take precautions and went out and did some more shopping. And this time I went to the shop where I can get my chicken bone for stock. On top of that, I also picked up some frozen shrimp and a whole bunch of ground meat and some lovely, those are expensive ribs. So right now I'm going to put on another big pot of chicken stock and mix that meat for meatballs and put the rest of this meat in the freezer. Oh yeah, and those ribs I'll cut in half and they'll be used for at least 2 meals. Okay, well here is my next batch of chicken stock all just put together, and all I've done is put the chicken carcasses, 2 packages of them, into the largest pot that I have with celery, carrots, and 1 onion. So 2 carrots, probably about 2 long stalks of celery and 1 onion. And I'm going to bring this to a boil, and then I will let it simmer overnight actually. So it'll be ready for canning tomorrow. Meanwhile, I have lots of meatballs to make. Oh, and of course, before I start the meatballs, I should put these ribs away. Now, these ribs are a bit on the unusual side. They're almost like mini pork chops. There's a lot of meat on them, so I do tend to cut these in half, and that should do for a meal, 2 meals for Mark and I. Okay, into storage these go. Okay, I'm going to start making meatballs, and I'm going to use my mixer for this because it's just too much effort otherwise. So, and I'm going to do it in 2 batches because there's no way that all this meat can go into 1 batch in my electric mixer. So, I'm going to cut this in half. Take approximately half of it and put it in the mixer. And we'll put the other half aside to do when you can do a mixture of pork, beef, goat, whatever you like. You can mix and match them, even turkey or ground chicken. So you can do a combination of all of them. You can do each one separately, but the secret to a nice tasting tomato sauce is to add some pork. So I just go right with the pork meatballs to begin with, and I'm happy with that. I used to do half and half with beef, and I prefer them all pork right now. So that's where I'm at with it. Okay, into that, what we're going to add is okay. There's 2 pounds of meat here. I'm going to add 2 eggs, probably about a tablespoon of salt, maybe 2 tablespoons of parsley, 1 whole chopped onion, and breadcrumbs. Now, I also would add grated Parmesan cheese, and I will add this bit that I've got. I'm just too darn lazy. I have lots of Parmesan cheese in the house, and with what's ahead of me here, I just don't feel like grinding any right now. And we always added quite a bit of Parmesan on our pasta, so it's not as though we're going to be without Parmesan cheese. Okay, so I'm going to put this together. So, yes, I will put in all the cheese that I've got ground in this batch. Why not? And as I said, 1 tablespoon of salt. Lots of parsley. I don't add any, oh, I could add garlic as well. And I may just get a little bit of garlic powder. I go quite heavy on the parsley, as you can see. And let me get some garlic powder. And no oregano. Oregano is for pizza. It's not for Italian sauce. Okay, so I've got about half a tablespoon of garlic powder. But when we cook the meatballs, I also cook them up in fried garlic and onions. So we'd be adding some more there. Okay, and 1 chopped onion. And 2 eggs. The other 2 is for the other half batch. Now, breadcrumbs, I'm going to start off with probably 1.5 cups. And I usually do the breadcrumbs to I judge by the feel, but we'll start off with 1.5 cups, and we may have to add some more. Okay, and I'm just going to mix that all up. And we'll get back to you when this is all mixed up. Actually, I've just stopped it to explain something. I'm making these meatballs to go into the freezer, not to can them. I could can meatballs. I have canned meatballs in the past, but if I'm to do that, you have to omit the breadcrumbs. And personally, I like the taste of them browned, so if I was going to can them, first of all, I would not put breadcrumbs, and I would probably fry up a batch of onions and garlic and slowly brown them at least before they went into a mason jar to be canned. But I go through that process when I'm cooking them, so it's either before and you have it canned or after, you know, when you've got them made and they're frozen. So it's all the same thing. Okay, I've stopped it. The texture seems to be fine. It looks like it'll hold a meatball together quite well. So I'm going to pull this out and mix up a second batch. You don't want to put too much breadcrumbs in there, but you do want to put enough to hold the meat together into a nice ball. Okay, batch number 2 is going in. So first our meat and our onions. Now, for those of you who maybe are not aware, it is the kind of meat that you use that imparts the flavor into your sauce. So each meat will give you a different flavored tasting spaghetti sauce or pasta sauce. And if I raised goats, you can betcha I'd use goat meat. It makes a very tasty, mild flavored sauce. So, okay, so we've got our eggs, our onions, our meat, and we're going to go with a tablespoon of salt. And you can go light on the salt. You don't have to go heavy on it because we can add more to the sauce when we're making it. Some garlic, and as I said, I do 2 heaping spoons of parsley. I never go light on the parsley. And start with 1.5 cups, which is probably the whole container of breadcrumbs. Okay, so everything's in. The only thing that's missing is my Parmesan, but that's fine. We'll add that to our pasta later on. Mix up our second batch. Okay, now the big job for me is to turn this huge pile of 4 pounds of meat plus add-ons into meatballs. So, and this is not the first video I've done making these, but I do keep meatballs in my home at all times. It makes for a quick meal when we don't feel like doing anything else. So I always have jars of tomato puree, meatballs, and pasta, and there's a meal that we can fix in half an hour. I know some people think you have to cook a sauce for hours and hours. You actually don't. Okay. It just depends on how you're cooking it. So I'm going to lay these out on a cutting board here, a plastic cutting board, and that will go into the freezer. So we will freeze these solid before we vacuum seal them. And we want them good and solid frozen so they don't smush. We want to keep them round. And if you figure approximately 5 meatballs per person, which I think is a lot. We never eat that many. I usually eat about 2, but that's me. But men like more, and Mark will have anywhere from 3 to 5. So I would say on average 8 for a meal. But even if you say 5 per person per meal, you can see that we can get adult people. I wouldn't say children, although you might be surprised. Children might eat more of them than an adult would. 5, 10. So there is one meal, and this pile hasn't even been touched yet. So I'm going to continue doing this, and when I'm finished, they will go in the freezer as is. Meanwhile, my chicken stock is boiling away. Well, okay, and as for my chicken stock, I just want to show you what the carcasses I buy look like. So they literally are just a carcass, a chicken carcass. But when you've boiled this down or simmered it down for hours and hours, you'd be amazed at how much meat there still is on this carcass. Like, even here I could already pull off a ton of meat. And yes, if I was so inclined, I would do that and make soup out of it. But for now, I'm just going to make chicken stock. And I have got 8 of these carcasses in this container, so it's going to be a nice strong chicken stock. Okay, as I said, this can now simmer overnight. Meanwhile, the meatball factory seems to be coming along just fine. Still have lots to do. And now I don't make small meatballs either. These are normal sized meatballs. And yeah, they do still take a while to make. If I made small ones, it would take longer still. But I don't see the point. I don't want them extra large, and I don't want them extra small either. Just a normal, medium-sized meatball. Okay. And I have managed to make, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times 6 is 48 meatballs so far, and I'm going to put these in the freezer right now. There is no point in waiting until the next batch is done. So 48 is almost 5 meals so far. Okay. Okay, the second batch is finished, and I got a total of 48, 58, 68, 78, 81, 82, 83 meatballs, which is at least 8 meals. So that means that each meal is approximately half a pound of ground meat. So now I know. Okay, so these are going in the freezer. When everything is frozen, then we are going to vacuum seal them all. Okay, this is Tony from Her Homestead Skills. I hope you enjoy this video, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.